After nearly 7 weeks of emotional testimony, the fate of Sean Diddy Combs is one step closer to being decided by a jury. The music mogul's defense team attempting to poke holes in the testimony of several witnesses in the closing arguments on Friday. They are accusing the prosecution of, quote, exaggerating the narrative of Diddy's lifestyle. With us to discuss the case, trial attorney and legal analyst Misty Marris. Misty, I saw you on air hours ago. You've been up very, very early. Thanks for sticking with us today. Always nice to have you.
Yeah, no problem. Early Saturday morning. I love spending it with you.
We love having you. So let's get into yesterday's closing statements. The defense said the government failed to prove any allegations of racketeering charges against Combs. That's the defense's take. I want to know your perspective. Did the prosecution prove their case against Combs, or what the defense is saying that these charges were widely exaggerated?
So in my view, it really relates to the specific charges that Combs faced. Remember, there's 2 transportation to engage in prostitution. To me, that has been proved by prosecutors. There's enough evidence to convict on that. As far as sex trafficking, the case relating to Cassie Ventura, that count, that is much stronger than the sex trafficking count that relates to the other victim, Jane. And then as far as RICO is concerned, Hannah, I am still, as I have been from the very beginning, skeptical of that charge, and I do not think the prosecutors met their burden. That being said, when you get jurors into the mix, anything can happen in a trial. So there's lots of different combinations that can come out as we enter verdict watch next week.
The defense telling jurors to summon the courage, again, another quote, to acquit Sean Combs. I want your reaction to that approach from the defense. Summon your courage.
Well, this is a real high pressure case, Hannah. I mean, you're talking about the most high profile trial that's going on in the country, maybe even internationally. And so what the defense said was acknowledging that it's a very difficult thing to acquit. It seems like the path of least resistance is to just move forward with a guilty verdict. You've heard all this terrible stuff about the defendant, but you have to analyze, jurors, whether or not he committed the crimes that are charged by prosecutors. So this is the strategy that's used by many defense attorneys. And the defense team in this particular case took it a step farther. They said, you got to be skeptical of the government and why Combs is being charged. And also just wrap this into their overall theme, which is this is trying to criminalize private, personal relationships, sex life, alternative lifestyles. It's simply not sex trafficking and RICO. So the defense got their point across during closings yesterday.
Misty, as you well know, because I've seen you at the courthouse, the prosecution took nearly 7 weeks to make its case compared to Combs's team, which wrapped up their case in 1 day. Do you think that's going to make a difference to the jury?
You know, it's always something that the defense team will weigh right before the prosecution's case ends, and then you're kind of looking at what got out on the record and making a decision about whether or not you're going to put on witnesses. Hannah, it's actually a risk-averse strategy, meaning kind of like the safest route to put on no case, just like Combs did, because then you're using all of the prosecution's evidence and witnesses and testimony on cross against them, right? So it's a way to say that if you put more witnesses on the stand, you could open up a can of worms that you didn't expect. They'll be subject to cross-examination, yet it can be effective, as we heard in closings yesterday, to say, this is what you heard from the prosecution's own witnesses. And despite that, the case still falls flat. And here, Hannah, one thing I had predicted and actually was true during the closing arguments was recognizing that for RICO, you have to have a conspiracy. And the defense made the point that all of the co-conspirators that the prosecution identifies as engaging in this criminal conduct, not one of them took the stand. So it's a conspiracy of one. And I think that's very effective to use the prosecution's case against them in that context.
And yeah, that's really great analysis, Misty. Let's look forward to Monday. The judge will be issuing instructions to the jury. What will you be looking to hear from him?
So these are going to be complicated instructions, Hannah, and we're talking about 50 plus pages of the jury charges that will be read. And they're going to lay out the law, the elements of each of the counts and each of the crimes. And it's what the jury is going to have to look at and apply all the evidence to. And it's going to be what the jury has to see prosecutors prove beyond a reasonable doubt on every single element. I'm also going to be listening for other charges that are typical in trial. One's called fallis in uno, fallis in omnibus. This one's important. False in one, false in all. It means that the jury, if they think a witness was lying about one thing, they can choose to disregard all of their testimony. There will be an instruction about using common sense. Don't leave your common sense at the door. There will be another instruction about the evidence and how to weigh the evidence. All of these things are critically important. They're the jury's roadmap. They will not have a copy of those instructions back in the jury room with them. So we may hear from them on clarification on some of those instructions after they're read.
I have to ask you, 7 weeks of testimony, the world's been watching. How do you expect this to go? Is there a scenario where Combs could walk free?
Well, I personally do not think there's a scenario he could walk free, although that is certainly a possibility. He could be acquitted on all of the charges. I think the transportation to engage in prostitution, the evidence is very strong. With the others, it could go either way. We could also see a hung jury on some or all of these charges. Hannah, as you noted, I've been at the courthouse. I'm talking to a lot of people who are really committed to watching this trial and have watched all the evidence unfold. There are diametrically different views on some of these charges from these folks. That could be reflected in the jury room. The only thing I'll say is there is pressure this week, and it's not a legal issue. It's the 4th of July holiday. So whenever you have jury deliberations going up against a holiday or a Friday, often there's pressure for the jury to get things done. And even though it's, again, not a legal instruction, it's life. These are people with lives outside of court. So will that pressure get us a verdict before court is not in session on Thursday and Friday next week? Well, maybe we see something Wednesday.
Yeah, I know you'll be at the courthouse. I know our reporters will as well. Misty Marris, always appreciate your expertise and context. Thank you again. Hopefully you get some sleep today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.